Happy Friday! Today is September 9th, 2016. Make sure you've got your notebook set up. 1.12, Describing Graphs. Your packet today has a sheet at the very back that has a graph that looks very similar to this. In fact, it is this graph. So what I want you to do is to take this last page of your packet and rip it off. Please do it neatly so you don't tear your corner too much. Place your piece of tape at the very top of this paper and tape it into your notebook sideways. So that means you're going to turn your notebook onto the side so you've got the long side or the spiral or the seam in the middle at the top of your notebook right now. So tape the top part of this paper in, so it should be hanging out over the bottom of your notebook. Now what I want you to do is to take the bottom of your paper and fold it up so that you can't see the writing on it anymore. This way it'll fit neatly into your notebook, but you can unfold it if you want to look at this later on to help you with your homework or study for your test. And right now you're going to keep it open so we can write on the graph. So as you talked about in the Do Now today, you looked at this picture and you came up with different possibilities for things that could have happened on Emma's walk. And you kind of made up a story about it. One of the cool things about graphs is that we all can kind of interpret the graph slightly different and explain how things are happening in different ways. And as long as you're using the units such as the time and the distance from home, when you're talking about this graph and you're really thinking about what the slopes mean or how steep the lines are, then you're probably good to go. So let's go ahead and look at that example that we taped into our notebook. So this is every morning Carnea walks along a straight road from her home to a bus stop, which is a distance of 160 meters. The graph shows her journey on one particular day. Describe what may have happened and include details like how fast she would have moved. So is she running? Is she walking slowly? Is she walking quickly? Did she stop? What is she doing to get here? The first thing I want us to do is to look carefully at this graph and make sense of what's happening. If we look at this x-axis, it's talking about the time in seconds. So that means at this point here in the graph, this is before she left, or the beginning of her walk. Make sure you have this jotted down in your notes as well. And this right here is the end of her walk. So everything that's happening in the middle of these two marks that we made is just what's happening during her walk. If we look at the y-axis, we have her distance from her house in meters. So as I tried to say before, this mark here means that she's at home. She hasn't left her home yet. This is the beginning of her walk. It's her starting point. When we move towards the top of the graph here, this is her moving further and further away from home. So I'm just going to make a note far away from home. So I know that she's moving away from her house as we see the lines on the graph start to move up this y-axis. I'm going to go ahead and clear my slate here so we have lots of room to write and we can see what's happening. We're going to focus first on this part A of the graph. I'm going to highlight this part blue. So if we look at part A, you should be able to tell a couple of things. First, that time is passing. This is the first 50 seconds of time. So I'm going to make that note 50 seconds. And we should also see that she's getting to be about 100 meters from home. So we know in the first 50 seconds she's 100 meters from home. What I want us to do is to look really carefully at the slope of this line. Is it moving up and down really, really fast? So is it almost a vertical line? Or is it moving kind of slowly, so it's like a horizontal line? In this case, if she's moving in a short amount of time and going a far distance quickly, you would be able to tell that she's probably running. If she's moving a short distance away from the house in a long amount of time, then we know she's walking pretty slowly. So what do you think she's doing here? Like, to me, this line looks pretty steady. Like, 50 seconds for 100 meters isn't that long. So I'm going to say that for part A, it's probably safe to say, I'm going to put C here because I have a small space, but write out her name. So C begins walking. Now we're making up a story here, so you can decide where she's walking. I'm going to say she's walking to the bus stop. We know that she gets 100 meters away from home. In 50 seconds, but something happens. And that happens in part B. If we look here, she's like suddenly changing direction. She's going closer to home again. So let's go ahead and talk about what could be happening here in this part B. So in part B, we're moving from 50 seconds to 70 seconds. So just 20 seconds worth of time. We can see that she's suddenly moving closer to home again. Now again here, she looks like she's moving in a pretty steady position. She might be going a little bit faster than before, but it's not super fast. So what do you think could have caused her to turn around when she's walking to a bus stop? Like, I think maybe she hears her name. So C hears her name. And sees her friend behind her. So of course she's going to walk back to her friend, but she's going to walk back just a little bit more quickly. So C walks quickly. Back to her friend. Now I apologize for having to write so big and filling up a lot of this space here. I'm writing on an iPad right now, so it's a little bit different than it would be on the board. But I'm going to read that to you one more time if it's kind of fuzzy, kind of hard to see. For part B, Cornelius hears her name and she sees her friend behind her. So she walks quickly back to her friend. If you're coming up with a different reasoning here, that's fine. Just make sure that you're talking about like the speed and what she's doing it. So that's why we talked about like walking quickly. And I'm going to say it takes 20 seconds. And she moved from this 100 meter mark back to 40 meters. So it takes 20 seconds to move back 60 meters. Remember, make sure you include as much detail here as possible to make your story really clear and so we can follow along and see exactly what's happening. So now that we've finished part B, I want to look at this part C. Now if you can tell here, this line is a lot more slanted, a lot more steep than it was before. It means it's more closely towards a vertical line than a horizontal line when you compare it to part A. So do you think she's moving quicker or more slowly? I think it should be pretty clear that she's moving more quickly. So we need to come up with something that's explaining why she's moving faster at this point. So I'm going to say the girls don't want to be late. So they run towards the stop. And if we look, it takes us from 70 to 100. So I'm going to say for 30 seconds. And we moved here from the 40-meter mark to 160 meters. So they run towards the stop for 30 seconds, and they ended up running 120 meters away. So the girls don't want to be late, so they run towards the stop for 30 seconds, 120 meters away. So now we see this graph look completely different all of a sudden than it did before. What's happening here is this line is kind of flattening out. So now we need to explain why part D isn't moving any closer or further away from home, even though the time is passing here from 100 to 120 seconds. So we need to come up with some place, some story to explain why the girls aren't moving. So I'm going to say the girls missed their bus. Let me fix this D. So I'm going to say the girls missed their bus. And so they're waiting on another one. Now this is going to wrap up our notes for today. Make sure that you have all of this copied down, and remember, you could have had something that's slightly different as long as you're talking about the fact that at the beginning we were walking. At the middle part, part B, we went back for some reason, and we did that kind of quickly, and then part C we were running, and then part D we stopped moving. So as long as you have those major things in there, your story can take whatever shape it wants to. Just make sure you're keeping those details about the distance and the time intact as you talk. So why don't you go ahead and try the rest of the problems in your packet. Be sure to complete the exit ticket as well. You're going to turn this exit ticket into the drawers by the door as you leave. Have an awesome weekend. I will see you guys soon. Bye.